Cool. So, welcome. Um, so I was just trying to remember. I have a bunch of questions. I don't even know if I'm going to get to them all, but I was just trying to remember when we met. I think it was like 10 years ago,
It's got to
something
be
like
at
that.
least probably 10 years ago out in Montana.
Yeah, yeah. So guys, we met. Tom and I met riding horses in Montana. I think 10 plus years ago, and since then we've been really good friends, and I've gone on a couple hiking trips together, one in Sedona and one in Colorado Springs, and just have been close. We have kids similar ages, um,
Yep.
so so I guess I'll just kind of walk through, your career and then ask some kind of broader questions. I mean, I think the idea is like these guys are all interested in business and life, and we're just trying to expose as much breadth of careers and points of view as possible. So, and particularly since they're all athletes, the skew is towards people who have experience being athletes as well. So,
Okay.
maybe we can start there. So, you were a offensive lineman at Dartmouth,
I was a long time
and
ago.
yeah, yeah. So tell me about that. What was that like?
Painful. It was great. I loved sports growing up. I played everything, and for some reason took to being a lineman. Probably the most thankless job out there. I was a lot bigger back then, and had the chance to go to Dartmouth to play football, and it was life changing or life. It helped set me on the trajectory that I'm on, or being part of a team, having great teammates, building great relationships, friends, um, working really hard, in the weight room, on the field. You learn a lot of lessons doing that. You learn a lot of lessons from setbacks. Um, I was, I had a really good start to my career, and then I destroyed my knee, and spent 6 months in a cast and not being able to walk, and learning how to come back from that and dealing with the fact that it was never going to be the same. Taught me a lot about life, and it was a great lesson as well. So I don't know. I could go on and on about what I learned playing
So you guys
sports.
didn't you guys have an undefeated season?
We had a few good seasons. Yes, we had my senior year. We were undefeated. Played with some great players. Was able to contribute to that team. After my injury, able to come back, play on that team, go undefeated. Played with a bunch of guys that played in the NFL. Played against a bunch of guys. So it was a lot of fun, high level for one AA football. But it was fun. It was very important to me at that time in my life, and like I said, that those experiences, winning, losing, the personal challenges, I think help shape my personality and kind of my path.
So, like, one of the things I kind of want to talk about, I mean, there's a bunch of like nuts and bolts business stuff I want to talk about, but I also like to just try and get a flavor for, people's personalities and their passions. And so I see
Mm-hmm.
your paintings behind you and also
Yeah.
like your hunting. So maybe just talk a little bit about what you love about hunting.
What I love about hunting. It's a good question. First, I love to be outdoors. I have to be outside. To be I have to spend time outside every day. I love to explore. I love to hike. I love to be in beautiful places. And if I can couple that with fishing or hunting, I would do that any chance I get. So that's one of the primary things. Is I've always loved the outdoors and being out there. I think hunting specifically versus hiking or other things, I love the challenge. Preparing for the hike, preparing for the equipment. I love to archery hunt, kind of that the skill that's involved there, the practicing. Um, I like that kind of discipline, and getting ready for it, and then the personal challenge. It's one thing to shoot arrows on a range; it's another thing to shoot it when there's an animal standing there, um, and you're nervous and your heart's beating and you have the adrenaline going. So I like the personal challenge, the camaraderie with like-minded people from all different kinds of backgrounds. very different than mine. I like interacting with different kinds of folks. Um, I could go on and on. I love to bird hunt because I love to work with my dog. I have a hunting dog that I spend time with, probably more time than I do with my family. Um, he, I love training him. I love watching him work. I love being out in the field with him. So I don't know. It's just a great. Um, it's a great physical and mental challenge for me to do the different things I do when I'm hunting.
Okay, so let's kind of get into the career stuff. So, right out of Dartmouth, you went to Deutsche Bank, is that right?
Yeah, it was yes, it was Bankers
So
Trust.
you're,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
it was a Bankers Trust when I started. It was purchased a couple of times. It was Deutsche Bank by the time I left. So yeah, I was an investment banker for 3 years.
And so why did you do that? And like, what was your experience like?
So I did it because I had no idea what I wanted to do other than to go into quote unquote business. Um, it was a liberal arts education at Dartmouth, very good education, but I didn't have any specific business training. I'd never taken an accounting class. Didn't know anything about the practicalities of finance in the real world. So I saw banking as a way to dive into not knowing what kind of industry I wanted to go into, not knowing what type of business I would be interested in or what aspects of business. My theory at the time was banking would allow me to see a lot of different types of businesses and to get some experience with the finance and the accounting that I didn't have coming out as an undergrad. It was either, coming out, it was consulting or banking were the two big things that a lot of people went into. Consulting didn't seem that exciting to me for whatever reason, and so I chose the banking route. How was that experience for me? Um, as everybody says, it was a grind. It was 3 years of 100-hour weeks, and um, at the time, I think I told myself I was having fun. Um, I was with a bunch of other folks my age, kind of thrown into this gauntlet, and we kind of supported each other and thrived on the pain together. Looking back on it, it probably wasn't the healthiest thing in the world. Um, so I'd say from a lifestyle standpoint, it was a grind for those few years. From a practical standpoint, and I was thinking about this, just kind of knowing what we were going to talk about. Honestly, from a practical standpoint, for me, coming from where I was, it was a great experience. As I said, I had no accounting, I had no finance background, and I had to figure that stuff out on the job. Um, and a lot of the grunt work that I had to do, a lot of the looking through financial statements, putting those, translating those into spreadsheets was really great background for me because I didn't have that formal education. My friends that came from business background, business schools like at Michigan and other places, they were bored out of their minds because they already knew this stuff. But for me, it was a necessary couple of years to learn the basics on the finance and the accounting. Um, Today, I don't know if I get the same experience because I think it's all done for you. We had paper financials. Nothing was electronic, and we had to. My job was to basically translate the paper financials from all the different companies we were looking at into spreadsheets. I think with FactSet and Bloomberg or whatever else is out there now, that stuff's just done. So I don't know. Fast forward 30 years, if I'd have the same kind of educational experience that I had, just given what I had to do most of the time for my job.
I mean, there's a bunch of guys who are definitely interested in banking analyst programs, and I'm
Yep.
going to give them both sides of it through the course of the summer. But kind of,
Yep.
what's your general advice as to like whether to do it and under what circumstances to do it?
If you're looking at it as a great way to make money and to because that looks interesting, or the fast lifestyle, or the travel and the expense accounts, and everybody's going to give you this advice. That's not a good reason to do it. Getting caught up in that and having that as the primary motivator, I haven't seen that work out for many people, myself included. Um, and it's easy to say that at my age, looking back, coming out of school, looking at the paychecks. Somebody once told me kind of halfway through my career, well, um, the amount of pay related to the job doesn't necessarily reflect its value. It reflects how miserable it is and what they have to do to keep people in the job. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about different paths. Kind of the intrinsic value, the intrinsic um, pleasure you might take from a job versus the monetary, and there's often a disconnect between what you're getting paid and how enjoyable it might be. At least that was my experience. Um, you know, why should you go into the job? Again, I think if you're interested in finance, you know you have an interest in finance and accounting, and banking does allow you, at least in my experience, it allows you to see a bunch of different types of companies. It allows you to, um, younger than in most industries, interact with more senior folks at these companies. So I think those were things that I got exposed to in my career that were important to me as I move forward. Um, so I would caution against if your motivation is purely financial, purely lifestyle, purely the external validation of, oh, I got that hard investment banking job at Goldman Sachs, so that makes me whatever. If that's the motivation, I would encourage you to look a little deeper. Um, but there are positives as far as I think the fundamentals and the training that you can get in these kinds of jobs.
So you went from there to Madison Dearborn?
I did. I was hired away from banking into Madison Dearborn. I worked on a deal, and the partner at Madison Dearborn liked me, so he hired me away.
And that was so you that was when you were whatever, 25 or something, 24.
I would have been 25. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So if folks don't know, Madison Dearborn is like one of the largest, most well-known private equity firms.
It
And so
it,
did
it
go
was. It
it
was.
was, it was when
I
you were
wouldn't
there, it
put
was.
I wouldn't put in that it was. I wouldn't put in that category anymore.
Um, so and then did they send you to business school?
No, I was 2 years as an analyst there, and then I went back to business school. They don't send anybody to business school. Um, uh, but I was able to come back after business school.
So
Um,
you went to Kellogg. Just to give the background, so you met your wife at Dartmouth. She became a doctor, and so that was the
yep,
place where you could both be.
yep. So that's right. So she finished medical school and was doing her residency in Chicago, and I went to business school here at the same time.
And so then you were at after business school, you were at Madison Dearborn for 12 years,
Maybe I think a little longer than that, but yeah, over a decade.
whatever, over a decade.
Yep.
And so like this maybe like a couple deals or like what was that experience like and kind of what were some of the highlights, I guess.
Sure. I'd say some of the deals that you may have heard of, maybe not. You guys are pretty young. So actually the deal that I worked on as a banker that got me hired at Madison Dearborn was we bought Ruth's Chris Steakhouse from Ruth Fertel, who founded the business. So that was kind of my introduction into the firm. While I was there, some of the better deals we did, more well-known deals we owned Yankee Candle. Um, Maker of a large manufacturer of scented candles. Probably not your favorite thing. You might have a mom, a girlfriend that might enjoy those. Phenomenal business. We sold that for over $1 billion to Jarden. We owned a company called Bolthouse Farms, which was super premium juices. You see them in the produce aisle in your grocery store. What you probably don't know is they also produce half the carrots in the country. So all the baby carrots that you get in a bag, they won't have their name on it, but that was half of those are produced by Bolthouse Farms. Phenomenal business, great company, great team. We sold that for I don't know, $1.5 billion to Campbell's. Interestingly, the management team bought it back a couple of years later for significantly less than $1.5 billion. So that's a whole nother story. I worked on a business called Things Remembered. You guys might have never been to a mall, but 20 years ago, you go into a mall if you wanted something personalized, you could walk into Things Remembered and they could engrave something and or embroider something and make a personalized gift for you. That one didn't work out so well. We ended up giving it back to the bank. or giving it to the bank as it went the wrong direction. So those were a few of the transactions that I worked on.
You look back at that time, what were some of the positives and what were some of the negatives?
So over the positives, again, I think positives from that industry is you get a lot of exposure to senior folks. You get a lot of exposure to um, kind of the senior workings of businesses as a very young person. So I was sitting on the boards of businesses as somebody in my late 20s, um, with executives that had been there for, that had 30 or 40-year careers. It was an unbelievable experience to learn from those folks, to help set the strategy for these businesses, have a voice in the room, at a young age. So I think that was something that it was exciting. It was fun. I think that was a positive. Negatives from that time in my life. I was, you know, I was a low man on the totem pole, though, even though I had responsibility at the companies at my firm for a long time. And so my time wasn't my own. I don't think I went on an entire vacation for probably 10 years. I'd have to go late, I'd have to cancel, I'd have to leave early, or if I was on the vacation, I was on conference calls, for days on end. Um, so I remember my mom's 70th birthday. We had a family trip to Kiowa to go golf for a week, and I was there for 12 hours and had to leave. My wife still hasn't forgiven me for that, leaving her with her in-laws uh, for that trip. So I think it was just normal and necessary to not to prioritize work over everything else, over time with my family, over my own personal health, over all of that. That was just the expectation. Was if they said jump, you asked how high. And so that was a negative. That was definitely a negative.
I mean, I assume that you were making good money.
I made very good money. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Yes, I made good money, and that you get, and that was the allure. That was the primary allure. Was the compensation. Um, and so it's hard for me to. Whenever anybody asks me, should I go into this business? Should I do this? It's very easy for me to sit here today as somebody who, you know, made more money than most people, not as much as a lot of people, but that I know, but I made a very comfortable living. It's very hard for me to say, don't do this, sitting in my position. Um, I can tell you, looking back on it, for me personally, the sacrifices I had to make, um, personally, family wise, um, I don't, I wouldn't do it again. Again, very easy for me to say, um, sitting here at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, not having to punch a clock in an office anywhere. Um, so yeah, the money was. I would tell myself, I had a voice in my head that say, yes, you basically sold your soul to the devil, but it's worth it. Um, and that's was my point of view and the way I lived for a long time.
So 2017, though, you left and became CFO at I can never say the name.
Lou
Man,
Malnati's,
Men.
Lou Malnati's Pizzeria. So yes, so I spent my career investing in consumer businesses, restaurants, retailers, consumer products companies, and 2017 I left to become the CFO. One of my actually really good friends that I've been an investment banker with right out of college had become the CEO of Lou Malnati's Pizzeria. It's a deep dish, iconic pizza chain here in Chicago. Um, one of my very good friends was the first non-family member CEO of the business. We're both in our early 40s. He was running the company. They brought in an outside investor. They wanted to grow the company more quickly. So I teamed up with him and the other members of the management team there to um, really put together a growth plan for that business and run the business under the new ownership with the new financial partners. Um, so it was a really exciting opportunity for me to go do that. I had aspirations at that point to running a business. I guess back to the private equity world, I loved working with the companies. I loved when we made an investment in a business, we would buy the whole business, we would control it, we would be on the board, and we would set the strategy for 3 to 5 years before we sold the company. And I loved that part of the business. I loved working with the management teams. I loved setting the strategy. I really didn't like going out and finding new deals. It's a different skill set. Um, Going out and trying to convince somebody to sell your company to you. I didn't enjoy it. I wouldn't have admitted it then, but I think I knew in my heart of hearts I wasn't very good at it. And if you're going to be really successful as a partner at a private equity firm, you have to go out and find deals. And that just wasn't, I wasn't that good at it. I didn't like it. And I knew I really liked working with the businesses. So I changed direction and went and said, if I like working with businesses, I'll go work in a business. I'll go be on the team every day and set the strategy for the business and do that. So I was able to join the company. I was able to invest in the company and had a couple really fun years doing that.
And so was the work balance any better? Was there kind of more meaningful work? What was it like to be an operator?
So a huge difference in work-life balance, which is one of the huge selling points. The instead of being on a plane every week to go look at different companies, the headquarters was 15 minutes from my house. Um, at the time, all the restaurants were in Chicago, so if I had to be in a restaurant, it was local. The CEO, my very good friend, was he had come up through the banking ranks and all of that, and was very much focused on family and having time with your family. Instead of work hard, but is a much better work-life balance as an operator versus what I was doing in banking.
I remember you were at the time it sounded like there was more kind of a culture of, I don't know, emotional intelligence, for lack of a better word.
Yep. Yeah, my friend, the CEO, was very much focused on having a good culture, um, to the point of bringing in outside resources, outside, counselors to basically work with teams to, recognize your own shortcomings, to recognize what it takes to be a good team member, to facilitate positive feedback within the team. So yes, it was very much a culture of camaraderie. They aspired to be a culture of camaraderie, of teamwork, of supporting folks to grow the business. And um, this was a family-run business that had gone from one restaurant to over 50 restaurants when I got there. I had looked at hundreds of restaurant investments in my time in private equity, and Malnati's had the best financial results of anything that I had seen. And a lot of it was because of the culture and the teamwork and the way that they had organically grown the business. So anyway, um, it was very different from a lifestyle perspective for sure.
So then after a couple of years, that kind of fell apart, and you don't need to talk about anything you don't want to there, but at that point, you were kind of out of the business and had a choice to make, right?
I did, yeah. It fell apart. My partner, my very good friend, was actually diagnosed with a very serious illness. He has since stabilized and he has brain cancer. He would tell anybody. He is that is stabilized and he is still alive and well and lives with a lives within the knowledge that he has brain cancer. But that was a life altering event. Suddenly, my very good friend and partner was out of the business literally overnight. They brought in a new CEO who I actually never met, but he had wanted nothing to do with me. So I was forced out of the business at the end of 2019, and
How old were you then?
45.
So
Yeah,
basically, at
45.
45, you got to decide what the hell you're going to do with the rest of your life.
At 45, I was faced with a yes. After a very traumatic, very not traumatic, it's not the right word. A challenge. It wasn't traumatic for me at all. It's traumatic for my buddy. For me, it was just a challenging year, and watching somebody suffer and be sick and just struck down. He was younger than me. He was 43 at the time. Um, Seeing that had a profound impact on me. Um, And so I had to decide, well, what do I do next? And so it was December of 2019, right before COVID hit. I had no idea COVID was going to hit in a couple of months. And I decided I just needed to take a breath and take a year off. I was going to travel and kind of pick up the pieces and figure out what was going to be, what my next steps were going to be. Then COVID hits, and that year of travel turned into not a year of travel, but a year home with my family, um, where I could recover from my experience and really think about what I wanted to do with my life, the rest of my life at that point. Unfortunately, during COVID, I had another good friend of mine pass away completely unexpectedly. Um, so I guess in March of 2020, right at the beginning of COVID. So um, a lot of reflection, a lot of personal reflection about what was important in life took place over that year. Um, and
So where
led.
where are you now and all that?
So where I am now is, I think through some conscious decisions about what lifestyle I want to lead and what I want to do with my life, was able to, I was able to transition comfortably to the point where I don't need to work. I don't need to chase, more riches. I don't need to chase trophies and other things that aren't really important. I don't need to have a private jet. I don't need to do things that a lot of my friends are still chasing. I can be comfortable. I don't, it's not that I don't have a care in the world financially, but I can be comfortable with what I have. And so I decided to just take a very dramatic turn and not jump back um, on the corporate treadmill, and retire from that world. And so here we are. That year of traveling that I was going to do in 2020, here we are 5 years later, and I'm still leading a life of leisure. I have found other things. I paint. You can see my amateurish painting behind me. I never picked up a pencil or a paintbrush until 2020. Um, so I found some different things like that are challenging, but just the experience and the um, taking pleasure in the process of doing them versus the outcome has been really helpful for me. As Tom said, I love to hunt, so I do as much of that as I can. And then I was determined to take my financial and accounting skills to try to do good. And so I've spent time over the last several years with what I call purpose-driven businesses, um, purpose-driven enterprises, not-for-profits, helping them think about business strategy in that more purpose-driven world. So I was actually just out in California last week speaking or sitting on a panel for a conference of folks that are trying to figure out how to mitigate um, fire risk in their forests by incenting people to take fuel out of the system.
Hmm.
And so I know nothing about forestry, but I do know about business models and attracting investment. And so I can use kind of those powers that kept me a slave to the office for so many years. Um, I can use those for some good, and to help out in other ways. And I find that very energizing.
You also have three hockey playing sons who like take up a lot of time.
Two now, the one retired. Um,
That's right.
the
Good.
one the one retired. If the coach at Wesleyan had just given him a little more love, then he might still be playing. But it wasn't to be. So I have three boys. So that's the other thing. When I stepped away from the corporate world, my oldest was 15, right in the middle of a promising hockey trajectory. So I had a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 8-year-old at the time. And between the three of them, they have between 180 and 200 hockey games a year, travel all over North America. So I've gotten to spend a lot of time with them and reintroduce myself to them. after not being around so much the first part of at least my older boys' lives.
I want to actually change gears a little bit. We're kind of running out of time here a little bit, but you introduced me to this book that I really like, and I will recommend to the class, not as part of the curriculum, but as a follow-on.
Yep.
This Comfort Crisis.
Yep.
Can you just describe what it's about a little bit and like why you found it so compelling?
Sure. So I don't know. Do you even remember that it was Seamus's buddies at dinner? They were
Yeah, well,
talking.
you can tell that part too if you want. How we
So
discovered it.
anyway, Tom's son is a Ranger qualified West Point grad, and he has two buddies that are Army Rangers based out in Colorado Springs. We had dinner with them one night, and they were talking about this book, Comfort Crisis, and how impactful it had been to these guys who are um, one is a um, world class marathon runner and ultra runner. The other one, obviously, very physically fit. But they were talking about how the concepts in this book, Comfort Crisis, were impactful on them. Folks that had been very physically very healthy and motivated guys. And so, essentially, the theory behind Comfort Crisis is the conveniences of the modern world are working against our evolution, what evolved humans into humans. So we evolved, what's one thing, like nutrition. We evolved for a feast and famine kind of existence. And your body is very efficient at taking in calories, building fat, and um, with the modern convenience of processed food and unlimited calories, it's very easy to get out of shape. Um, so that's one thing. Modern climate control. Your body was made to endure heat and cold, and there's actually physiological reactions that take place in reaction to heat and cold that are really important for your body to maintain its health. If you live in a 72-degree environment all the time, those those reactions don't take place. And he goes through the science behind all of these pieces of his theory. But then Michael Easter is the author. His big thing is you don't have to go to extremes to get the advantage of these different things. So it was the first book like that I had read, where it's full of very practical advice of everyday things you can do to have a huge impact on yourself physically, emotionally. And so it changed the way I eat, changed the way I think about my fitness. Guys might be a little bit young for it, but I think as you get older, you
One
might.
of the things he said that I thought was really cool. So basically, like the through line of the book is like he's on this crazy hunting trip in
Yeah,
Alaska where basically he and these guys they need
yeah,
to like kill a caribou or they're gonna starve. Like,
yeah,
and there's rules. Like you can only kill a caribou that's like a male kill caribou that's really old that's gonna die
yeah,
anyways.
yeah. I
Um,
forgot. Yes.
and so he bounces back and forth between all this science and that story. But
Yeah,
the point of that is that part of what he says is that, you know, we need to like do something that's so hard, like a
yeah,
challenge every year that's so hard that there's like a 50-50 chance you're going to succeed.
yeah,
And in that, putting yourself in that amount of like challenge and discomfort is how you maintain your health, basically. So it's
yeah.
just
That
something
was
to consider. I put it in the chat.
yeah. That was the last bit, which is if you make yes, you once a year, you should do something that you have a 50% chance of failing, something physical. And
Yeah.
there's lots of benefits to that. And you use all these other techniques to kind of get yourself prepared for that challenge. But that there's all kinds of reasons to do something that you might not succeed. He and his friends moved a 200-pound rock like 3 miles underwater, like 2 feet at a time, across the bay in San Francisco, just
Yeah.
to do it. So anyway, that concept of pushing yourself physically and mentally to the edge, um, and probably failing has a lot of benefits for anybody.
All right. So let's leave it there and then let's just go around the horn and everybody can ask a question and I'll ask a couple more questions and then we'll wrap because I don't want to belabor it here. Joe, you want to go first? Do you have a question for Tom?
Yeah, sure. And I actually want a quick comment about that book, Comfort Crisis. That's actually pretty cool. 200, pound rock. We actually are reading Shoe Dog for Tom's class right now. And one of the things that Phil Knight says, before you move a boulder, or before you move, the man who moves a mountain has to move some rocks first. So I like the process of trying to do something challenging for that. But, really enjoyed hearing about your story throughout your career and where you are today. I guess I want to ask real quick. The two things stuck out to me, and one was that you first went into banking because you just didn't really know what to do. So I guess the question I have right now is now with all the years of experience you've had throughout banking and private equity, what do you think you would go into today right out of college?
Hmm. I would say has nothing to do with any of that. I'd be an architect. Uh, which has, and that's the honest answer, is looking back on like the things that I enjoyed and um, between the math and the creativity and the drawing and all that, that's what I would do. If I stayed in the business world, um, I think I would find a purpose-driven business, so somebody that had a mission beyond just making money, um, that was authentic, and I would work at the business first. When I left banking and I left private equity and I became an executive at a business that had private equity investors, um, it was shocking to me how disconnected the private equity folks were from what was really going on day to day at the business. And I was the same way, right? So I would have had a much better appreciation for relationships, power dynamics, lots of different things if I had actually worked at the company versus coming in as an investor.
Davis, you got a question?
Yeah. So as someone who worked in private equity for over a decade, what do you think is the best background or experience to have if you're trying to break into private equity?
Yeah, my data is a little dated, but honestly, the only background that we would recruit from was folks that had come through banking and preferably already had some private equity experience. They'd either banked private equity deals, they had some knowledge of the business. Um, Other folks, Bain, there are other folks that would take through the consulting route. They would kind of split their young hires into half bankers, half consultants, and bring them in. Again, it's been a decade since I've been in the recruiting funnel, um, but that was the only route. Um, so if you wanted to be hired pre-business school, you had to have banking or consulting. If you wanted to be hired post-business school, you had to have some private equity experience on your resume before you went to business school. That, unfortunately, we could argue, I could give you a million reasons why that's not the way it should be. The founder, for instance, the founder of Madison Dearborn, none of them had private equity experience. One was a West Point grad, one was a Navy aviator. Um, they had lots of different experiences, but then they hired the same people that looked the same after that.
Yeah, I think
Thank
it's
you.
still true. I think it's, I think if you want to go into private equity, the best route is to get a banking analyst job and leverage through there. We'll talk about that a lot more as the summer goes on. But
Yep.
Anthony, you got a question?
Yeah, just hearing about how you experience certain periods of uncertainty, especially through your corporate career and even struggling to find out if you wanted to continue what you were doing. How did you handle those just in general?
Hmm. How did I handle those? It's a good question. Um, for a long time, I didn't. I took the path of least resistance. So I would say I had uncertainty from very early on. Like I knew I wasn't extremely happy doing what I was doing. So what did I do? I ignored that and I just kept thinking, you know, well, I got to get into a good business school. Once I get into a good business school, everything will be good. And then after that, it's like I got to get back into private equity, and then I got to make partner. And I did all those things, and they'd feel good for like 3 minutes, and then they wouldn't. So I'd say for a long time, I just ignored them. And then after everything blew up at Malnati's, I got professional help, quite honestly. So I found a wonderful counselor therapist who was able to help me think through what was important, my priorities, and understand why I had ignored these things for so long. So um, that was my path. Was ignoring it, focusing on the external uh, validation for a long, long time.
Good question. Hunter, you got a question, buddy?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think what you said before, like, is kind of how I feel like. What would you say? I mean, going into the business, like knowing that you wanted to do business, but going into it, like not knowing where to start, how did you navigate through that and like eventually like specialize into the career that you did? Like,
Yeah, I
I
wish
guess
I could tell
where
you.
how did
Sorry, I wish I could tell you it was really well thought out and that I had this like wonderful plan. That's not the truth. I mean, it was. I have no idea what I want to do. Um, I'm not willing to commit myself to any specific company at this point. My buddies are doing banking. I'll go down that path to interview. And quite honestly, um, be, I ended up, it was complete happenstance. College roommate of mine, his brother was in Chicago, needed an investment banking analyst to start right away. I graduated in December, not in June. It took me a little longer than the average bear to get through school. Um, and my roommate's brother needed somebody to start in February. And my parents said, that sounds like a great idea. Go start. And so I did. So there wasn't a lot of soul searching. There wasn't a lot of reason behind it. It was more being lost and not knowing what I wanted to do and knowing that this was a path I could go down. And there seemed to be some good options at the end of the road if I didn't like banking. So that's the other that is one thing about the banking. It did give different options. Um, so that's how I did it. I wish I could tell you that there was some great thought process. There just wasn't.
yeah, and then like as far as like later on when you moved to Madison Dearborn or anything, like do you think that sort of, I mean, maybe like breaking in, that was how it was, but was there any sort of evolution or is it kind of just like a natural progression you felt like?
That was again, that was luck. Um, I worked on I worked on a transaction when Madison Dearborn bought Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. I was the analyst on that deal. I spent 2 weeks on a plane flying around with the head partner at Madison Dearborn trying to finance that transaction. Um, he was an athlete. I was an athlete. He took a shine to me and hired me. So again, um, that was a lot about I look back on that decision. Um, it was a really good relationship. He is still one of my best friends. I just was down in Florida golfing with him a couple of weeks ago, and so that was the path there. Um, again, but it was less about I really want to be in private equity, and it was like, hey, I really like this guy. He wants me to come work for him. Everybody says private equity is a great thing to do. Let's go do it.
I mean, just on that one point, I'll just piggyback a little bit, which is that like part of what we're trying to do this summer is like expose you guys to a bunch of different executives, a bunch of different people, and that when you see someone who you like, who you feel some affinity for, like build those relationships, and like I think that's a really good way to try and begin to figure out what it is you want to do and who you want to be. Um, because I think those relationships in business are super important, but it's also a way to get insight into like what's that like, as
Yeah,
opposed to just kind of blindly going into banking or consulting, which going in blindly is definitely a bad idea. So, Sam,
Hey, first of all, thanks for being here and thanks for talking to all of us. Really, really appreciate that. Um, but something that kind of drew my attention when you were talking was your kind of your hiking experience and all your traveling. And I just kind of want to know more like how that has maybe helped shape your perspective or your approach to your career, and kind of like how throughout your years, like you've balanced travel, work, and family, and how your values around that have evolved over time. I kind of want to know about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say during my career, I don't have a great connection as to how like my love of the outdoors and hiking and all that influenced like my career path. Um, what I would say is my inability to enjoy those things while I was working, my inability to engage in those kinds of activities absolutely played a role in my change of direction over the last half a decade. Um,
Okay.
I think, and as far as prioritizing my family over my career, um, I did not do that for a long time. And so my priorities have flipped 180 degrees um, since then. And I would, if I had to do it all over again, um, I would aspire to do something or um, to test whether or not I really had to do everything I had to do. Um, could I have balanced life better during those years? Um, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would have been out of that career a lot faster, but that wouldn't have been a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Zach.
Yep. Once again, thanks, Tom. This is
you're
super
welcome.
informative. I have a question that's a little similar to Sam's. It's related to your time at Dartmouth playing football,
No?
and specifically, if your athletic experience, if you felt that led to you having a leg up in any aspect of the professional world, and how you use that experience to move yourself forward.
You know, I think it did. I think the athletics had a couple of important um, things for me. One, just this can be good or bad. Kind of setting long-term goals and driving towards them. Um, very important. I think in succeeding. Um, so I think my athletic, especially given I was an offensive lineman, it was all about getting bigger and stronger, and that doesn't happen overnight. It takes years. So, kind of setting those goals and working towards them, I think, is really important. Um, I talked about it earlier. I think dealing with the failure, dealing with when things don't go well, how do you react? Um, I think that's important in my career. And then I think finally, just being part of a team. Um, and being an offensive lineman, you are an anonymous part of a team, but important in understanding that and building those relationships with your teammates. And, um, you know, that was, that was really important from a interpersonal perspective going forward, working on different teams, working with different folks, building those relationships certainly helped, I think, helped shape me and shape my career path.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Oh, Max, go.
Um, just really quick, I appreciate you for taking your time to give us some information about your career. So one question about like what is one skill or habit that we could try to learn or implement to help get ready for private equity or investment banking?
Attention to detail, uh, I think is above anything else critically important. Um, just in every aspect, right? When you're a junior banker and there's a typo in a book, everybody makes a big deal about it, and not because the typo is the end of the world, but because that attention to detail is really important. Um, so just having that care and the follow through in everything you're doing um, is really important.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to talk about this a lot, but that certainly applies for every which way that you appear in the application process, the interview process, thoroughness with which you prepare, how you handle yourself, how you write thank you notes, all that stuff. Being meticulous is that's the only way you're gonna have any shot, basically. So,
And be honest.
and be honest, yeah.
Your fault. Own your mistakes. I worked with 10 to 12 a year for 15 years. I don't know. I worked with hundreds of analysts at Madison Dearborn. One got fired for making a mistake and lying about it. If you don't know the answer, say you don't know the answer. If you make a mistake, own it. Don't try to cover it up. It just makes things worse. Those be attention to detail and be honest.
All right, so two more questions quickly. So I made all these guys tell me their favorite movie to embarrass them. What's your favorite movie?
I saw that question. My favorite movie is Pulp Fiction.
That's a good choice, man. It's not my favorite movie, but it's close. Top 10, I would say.
And I will tell you, I'm not a moviegoer. But it is, and I was thinking about why is that my favorite movie? Probably the biggest part of it is the people I saw it with. I was probably my sophomore, junior year in college, and we all went into town, and I was with my two roommates, and it was just such a shocking, different, entertaining experience. I'll never forget it. I don't know if I've seen it since.
There are
But
definitely scenes in it that are like crazy and very funny.
yeah. So anyway, that's my favorite.
All right, last question. So if you, I mean, you may have already answered this, but if you want to leave these guys with one word to focus on, what would it be?
Fulfillment.
Cool. Well, that's it. It's a wrap. Thanks, man. It was awesome to have you here. It was a great
Yeah.
conversation.
I hope there's a nugget in there in my rambling.
It's all
So
good. It's all good.
nice to talk to you. Good luck with school and athletics and all of that.
All right, man. We'll be in touch.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
All right. Talk to
Good
you guys
luck.
later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
I appreciate it.